So thank you for doing this. Number one, it's I've never had a national.
Absolute pleasure. It's great to meet you. I'm a
Never
big
had
fan,
it.
actually.
Oh, don't be
I've
daft.
been a fan of yours since I was about 15 or something, or
Oh,
12 or
great.
whatever.
Cool.
Yes, yeah.
Um, I've never had a bona fide national treasure on the program, so
Who
there you go.
knows? I
And
don't
and
know.
and actually, a fellow football fan, I believe. Is that right? You support Oldham?
I did. I had a season ticket. I grew up really near the ground. And so when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, I had a season ticket. And that corresponded to the time when the glory years at Oldham, the Joe Royle years. So we were founder members of the Premier League
Oh,
during
is
that
that
time.
right?
Yeah,
God.
it was just a remarkable time to be an Oldham fan. It was brilliant, FA Cup semi-final, League Cup final. Um, so yeah,
God, that's all disappeared in the midst of time. I didn't realise, to be honest. Um, yeah, well, we're about to enter into a world of hell with Sheffield Wednesday at the moment.
uh,
Uh,
what's happening?
oh my God, we're about to get relegated on Saturday. It's a toss up between us and Derby County.
Hmm.
It's not good news, basically. Um, but anyway, growing up in Oldham, then
Yeah, yeah.
uh, tell me all about. I remember going to Oldham's ground, and it was one of the coldest experiences I'd ever had in my life.
That's what everybody says, and that was part of the secret of our success, I think. And we had a plastic pitch as well at the time, which everybody said was part of the
Cheating.
success. Yeah. But yeah, Joe Royle was one of those. Oldham were that team that everybody loved at the time. It was all attack, and we'd win 6-3 and things like that. It was like Newcastle under Kevin Keegan. It was like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And
How, how wonderful! Good God, we're lucky to get nil nowadays. Anyway, um, so your I love the title of your thesis. By the way, I was just looking at that during my research. I, it should be an album title: Double Diffraction Dissociation at Large Momentum Transfer.
yeah,
Very catchy.
yeah. Well, you see, as you'll probably know, diffraction is usually low momentum transfer. So
Yeah. No.
diffraction. Yeah, but it was Hamburg. I did it in Hamburg at a lab called Daisy, which
Right.
is just a brilliant place to be a PhD student. I mean, it's one of my favorite cities
I
of
love
all.
Hamburg too. Yeah, it's great.
So, yeah, those were happy times. Doing a PhD it's one of the hardest things. Certainly, writing your thesis, I always say to students, it's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do because it's the culmination of 3 or 4 years of work, and it's difficult. And it's supposed to be difficult because it's a PhD.
Yeah.
But the time leading up to it is the time when you're at your freest, probably, because all you have to do is do that job. You've got to do your research in particle physics, which I was doing. You've got to do a bit of work on the accelerator, but that's a great fun. This massive machine that's recreating the conditions that were present just after the Big Bang and things like that. It's fun. So that's your job. Just to find things out about nature. Nothing else. You don't have to manage anything. You don't have to apply for grants or anything like that. You just have to find stuff out, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. My two are doing MAs at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if they went on to do PhDs. But um, they, yeah, I did try to have a look at the PDF of the of it, and I got lost on the index. So I have to say. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. I'm also an enormous fan of science, as you probably guessed from my love of technology. And um, fortunately enough, I know somebody who works for the European Southern Observatory, and
Oh, yeah.
he gets me in Munich, and he gets me into all these amazing places I'd never get into otherwise. Like, I went down to CERN, and actually went down to the actual thing itself, because you're not allowed, as you know, you're not allowed down there when it's in operation because of the radiation. when they were doing maintenance, and it just blew my mind. It's like a giant James Bond set, isn't it? Really?
Tremendously impressive. And I was around quite a lot when we were building it, because I was involved in a project to put detectors close to the beams, and that those beams of particles are tremendously energetic. There's some, I'm trying to remember the PR number now. It's something like, well, they're certainly less than the diameter of a hair, of a human hair.
Right.
They carry the energy of an aircraft carrier traveling at 30 miles an hour.
No.
So it's quite an extreme experiment, but its job is it's the energy that matters. You're trying to recreate the conditions that are present close to the origin of the universe. Partly because, I suppose mainly because those are the conditions where you uncover the simplicity of nature. So we're interested in the fundamental building blocks of nature and the forces that stick them together. And those are the kind of energies at which you see the underlying simplicity.
So talk to me about antimatter. How can you possibly capture antimatter?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is it's completely normal stuff. So it gets kind of a weird reputation because of, I don't know, the Da Vinci Code and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's stuff that gets made in nature all the time. So there are things called cosmic ray collisions that are happening above our heads now, the high energy particles hitting the Earth's atmosphere from space. And they routinely make antimatter. And that's indeed how it was discovered, first of all. And so an anti-electron, for example, it is the same as an electron in every way, except it's got a positive charge rather than a negative charge. But apart from that, it's exactly the same. So you can build atoms out of antimatter. The thing you refer to, though, is that it is true that if you get a positron, which is an anti-electron, and bring it into contact with an electron, then they vanish in a sort of burst of energy. So it annihilates with matter. So if you let it touch anything, then it just disappears in a little flash. So you have to contain it when you make it in a magnetic field. So you just hold it in a magnetic field, just like an old TV, really. An old TV set with an electron beam, and you sent it through a vacuum and then bounced it onto the screen, and that's how you watch TV. It's in principle, no more difficult than that, right? In practice, it's a bit more difficult, but give or take, that's what you do.
Okay, so I'm ramping up the complexity of the philosophical aspects of the questions there. Obviously, you fully comprehend the principles of quantum physics, which I definitely struggle with because most of it seems counterintuitive. What future technologies do you think are going to be developed based on what we're learning about quantum physics now that might help us?
Oh, well, I mean, the first thing to say is that things like transistors are essentially quantum mechanical devices. It's a quantum mechanical effect at the heart of it. And so we use quantum mechanics is at work essentially in everything. Yeah. So, but the spirit of your question, I think, is what might be around the corner.
Yeah.
And pure quantum devices, I suppose quantum computing is the most exciting and the thing that people might have heard of. And quantum computers are, they're really not, if you ask what they are, they're not really simulating nature, right? They sort of are nature in a way. So they're using the properties, the fundamental properties of nature to do things. And the thing that they can do at the moment is really simple things like factorize large numbers. And very famously, they're quite good at that. And you can use that kind of technique as well in encrypting communications. So that's where they're used or can be used at the moment in the near future. And factorizing large numbers, by the way, is a problem because all of our encryption is based on not being able to factorize large numbers. So a lot of companies are very bothered about the fact that one of the things quantum computers are really good at is cracking encryption that we use in our bank accounts and things like that.
Oh, shit.
So that'll have to be redeveloped when quantum computers become easily available. But go further than that, though, I think there are reasons to believe that if we're trying to simulate nature, so we're trying to do things like climate forecasting, weather forecasting, those things, then it looks like going further into the future, these devices are going to be tremendously good at that. But even more exciting, I mean, I can't resist talking about it because at the moment I'm doing a lot of research on black holes, right? So
Right.
black holes is my main thing at the moment. I'm writing a book on it. I've got a PhD student who's going to start doing some work on it. And the most remarkable thing about black holes, which links to quantum computing, is that this is quite a long story, so I'll tell it very quickly. But Stephen Hawking, decades ago, asked a very fundamental and important question, which is what happens to information if you throw it into a black hole? So by information, I mean anything. So people talk about a book or an iPhone, whatever it is you throw it in. Has that vanished from the universe forever, is the question. Stephen initially thought it did. He thought black holes destroy information. Now, that would be fundamentally disastrous for physics, because if there's one law that I think everyone agrees upon, it's that thou shalt not destroy information.
Yeah.
Information is conserved. That's determinism. It's saying that if you know the state of something, the system now, then in principle, you can predict what it's going to do in the future, and you can predict what it was like in the past. If you've got these things in the universe that destroy information, then that no longer holds. So you couldn't look at the universe today and predict what it's going to do tomorrow, because information is going away. So the question was, is that true? And the answer is no, it isn't. So now, in the last few years, we're pretty sure that, or I think sure, that black holes do not destroy information. But that raises a really profound question, because black holes evaporate away through a process called Hawking radiation. So you leave a black hole for long enough, and it will have gone. So the thing is, all right, so I throw this book into the black hole, and then in a trillion years, it's gone. It's just radiation. What's happened is the information in the book imprinted somehow into this radiation? And the answer is yes. But the weirdest thing is, which links to quantum computers, is that it now looks like we know how it's imprinted in the radiation. And it seems to be imprinted in the way that we store information in quantum computers, and specifically the way that we correct for errors in the memory of quantum computers. It's called a quantum error correction code. So it's one of the big challenges with building quantum computers, is how to deal with errors in the memory. And so you store it redundantly and all sorts of things. And it looks like the black hole's doing the same thing, right? So it bizarrely, it seems there's a role for the quantum error correction codes, quantum computing, essentially, in understanding the fundamental way that nature works, specifically in black holes. And so the next thing people tend to ask is, does that mean we live in a computer simulation? And the answer is, I don't think it does, right? I think what it's telling us is that nature at its fundamental level is about information. It's about bits, or specifically quantum bits. So the modern way of looking at nature is that it's really about algorithms and information. And out of those algorithms emerges the reality that we perceive. And that's really fascinating, I think. So it's a new way of looking at reality, but it's driven by quantum computing and black hole research.
Crikey. Wow. Okay.
So
I like to think I'm
quite
kind of smart, but it's quite taxing to kind of comprehend this stuff, I have to say.
I think the thing to say is that it seems for a long time, there's a very famous physicist, John Wheeler, who goes back, he was a supervisor of Richard Feynman and all sorts of things. So you know, in physics, he's
Richard Feynman.
one of the legends, Wheeler. And Wheeler had this thing called it from bit, he used to call it. And this is back in the 60s. So he thought that this world that we perceive, somehow underpinning it is an information description, is the deepest description. And it seems that that's correct. But it's come from trying to understand how black holes evaporate. Isn't that it's a great example of serendipity in science.
Wow.
The fundamental link between something as an engineering challenge, which is how do you build a quantum computer with memory that's stable and doesn't have errors in it, and black holes, you would think there's no link, but there does seem to be a very fundamental link between the two.
Okay.
I'll say one cool thing, actually. A really cool thing, the last cool thing I'll say. So black holes are the densest storage information objects that we know of in the universe. In fact, that is possible to exist, actually. So you say, have I got my phone? How much? What happens if I keep putting information in, bit after bit after
Yeah.
bit, and I could exceed its memory somehow and just keep doing it? Eventually, what would happen is it would collapse into a black hole, and that would be the maximum amount of information that can be stored in that region of space. But here's the weird thing. So the maximum amount of information that can be stored in a region of space, so that's a black hole, is proportional to the surface area of the black hole and not the volume, right? So it looks as if really volume of space is not a real thing. Really, all there is a surface. And that leads to this idea of the holographic, and we're all holograms that people sometimes talk about. But it's like saying I've got a library, and how many books can I get in? How much information can I get in the library? And you might think, well, it's to do with the volume of the library. How many books can I fit inside? But it's not. Fundamentally, it looks like nature is constructed such that you can only paper the outside of the library with books. It's like there is no inside. And that seems to be what the black holes are telling us, which is really very strange.
Okay, then. So this kind of look, we're looking at various films that have tried to deal with this sort of thing, and in visual terms, which is quite kind of mystical, the Nolan kind of films and stuff like that.
Well, as it happens, I've got this is one of the great textbooks, right?
Oh,
I'm sharing. I know it's an audio podcast, so I shouldn't be doing this. Massive textbook. It's called Modern Classical Physics. It happens to be on my desk, but it's by Kip Thorne and Roger Blanford.
it makes you look like a very tiny person. That book.
Yeah, massive book. But Kip Thorne, who won a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, one of the greatest living physicists, essentially co-wrote Interstellar. So his ideas form the basis of Interstellar. So all that weird stuff about, you're right, the quantum information, and what Chris Nolan tried to do in Interstellar was build a movie out of those ideas. And it's really hard because they're really abstract ideas. So Interstellar gets really abstract at the end. But ultimately, it's about relativity and black holes. And it had one of the greatest physicists alive today advising on it.
Yeah, I didn't like Tenet at all. By the way, I thought it was rubbish.
Tenet's unusual, but Interstellar I like a lot.
Interstellar, I thought was really fascinating, but in a nutshell, I think what you're saying is complete. You explain things so brilliantly. I feel stupid for not understanding them, but but the point I'm trying to make is that I think we need to somehow merge the worlds of philosophy and science, because it seems to me as we get closer to these, if we rationally look at the evidence for things like you're talking about, it increasingly appears to be magical, right? Or at least philosophically almost impermeable. And it just makes it makes me wonder anyway, and I'm sure it does you too, about ancient philosophies and ancient cultures and how they coped with different forms of reality, their reality at the time, and how it related to their perception of the universe and their philosophies. And that's what fascinates me, is the way that contemporary science can shine a light on things that we need to maybe re-examine from the past. What do you think about that?
I think what the way I would put it is that cosmology and quantum mechanics and they're linked in black holes, right? It's where relativity, which is our theory of the universe, really, and gravity, it comes into contact with our theory of the subatomic world and quantum mechanics. Forces you to think about them both. What they're doing, which is where I think it links to your question, is they are delivering a picture of reality which is not the one that we experience. So they force us to consider the facts that what we think of as reality is really not the fundamental description of it. There's something very different. The universe is very different to the way that we perceive it. And I suppose in that sense, it's one of the useful, in an educational sense, you might think, why should we teach fundamental physics at school, let's say? one of the key reasons I think is it challenges us very, it's a visceral challenge. You say, the idea that you can, it's kind of mystical, isn't it, to just say, well, reality is not what you think it is, and that has no content. But it really does have content when you say that our investigation of nature has told us that reality is not what you think it is. Then it forces you to think about it. And I think that it's a good intellectual exercise. There's a great a couple of essays actually that are wonderful to read about the value of science. One of them is by Richard Feynman, and it's called The Value of Science. It's 1953. And if you type it in on the web,
Yeah.
The Value of Science, Richard Feynman, you go straight to the PDF of it. It's freely available. And he explores as I said, the value of science. And there's some obvious things. We've talked about them, like transistors and, technology and all that stuff. The fundamental basis of the modern world, right, comes from this stuff. But ultimately, he says that the most valuable thing is the way it teaches us to think. So nature is very good at forcing you to think differently. It puts you in your place. It delivers perspective. But it also brings you face to face with these fundamental questions of the nature of reality, but with evidence attached to them. So it's not, it stops being this thing that you do when you sit, and have a few glasses of wine and sit on a hillside and look at the stars. And it's kind of just almost like, whimsical speculation about what it all means. There's actually very precise observations of nature that also force you to think about what it all means and what it means to exist. And the other thing I just say about Feynman is the interesting thing is that ultimately he came to the view that the most valuable thing of all is that nature forces you to accept that you're wrong quite a lot. So he says that scientists have a great deal of experience with uncertainty and with being shown to be wrong and with having to change their mind because nature doesn't care who you are or whether you're the prime minister or the president or what your name is. He famously said, if your opinion disagreed with nature, it's wrong. And he said, that is the key, right? It's the key to wisdom, the key to enlightenment in a way, is to understand that we don't know everything.
Yes.
That's it. It's the most important thing of all. It's this lesson, a fundamental lesson. We don't know everything. He even said that that's you can see that in democracy, the way that democracy works. I mean, what is a democracy if it's not? The most important point is that you change governments every 4 or 5 years. And that's the most important bit. It doesn't actually matter to first order what the government is. I mean, we all, it matters to us depending on our political leanings. But ultimately, it's the fact that one day they'll be gone and there'll be somebody else running things. And it's the orderly transfer of power, which he said it's the admission that we don't know how to run a country. If you think you know how to run a country, you wouldn't have a democracy. And so the fundamental is humility.
Interesting. Humility is very important. Adam Curtis, I heard him being interviewed there's a podcast by a guy called Blind Boy who's really popular, and he interviewed him, and he was saying that the latest film or series that he had on, can't get it out of my head. He was describing it as saying that the entire series is about making people realise that worldwide democracy and the governments that are put into power by the theory of democracy haven't got a clue what's going on, and they can't control the outcomes that they're creating, and it's all getting out of control. And so it's like everything's about damage limitation all the time. And there's some kind of scientific thought around this kind of dissolve it. All empires fail. This thing. I kind of love it. It relates to what you're talking about.
That's a feature. It's a benefit. It's not a bug in the system. It's good that it's too hard. Running a society is so difficult that nobody really knows how to do it. And so the only thing you can do is just change it every now and again. And it's funny, I've kind of come to terms with that, because we all, at some point or other disagree with the choices that are made and the government that's in power. And
you could say that. Yeah.
We do. But I've come to accept, I've come to understand that the very fact that I disagree with the way the country is run at any given time, is something I should celebrate, because it means that I live in a free country. But if everybody agreed, if there was 100% of the vote for someone, we would no longer live in a democracy. We'd not live in a free country anymore. So I think that this higher principle that we should celebrate the fact that sometimes things aren't going our way, it's going somebody else's way.
Yeah.
And I might think it strongly disagree with it, but ultimately it's a sign that everything's working. As long as it comes around again, as long as at some point,
As long as it comes around again, I think that's
but it does. I mean, in our lifetime, it always has. So you have to think that it will. Otherwise, we live in a one-party state, and then we're in deep trouble. So you've got to remember that when your guys are in power as well, and when your team is running the country, you've got to understand that it would be very bad if that continued forever. That's really hard to, isn't it? It's very hard to think that.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. Are you familiar with a book called Gödel, Escher and Bach by Douglas Hofstadter?
One of my favourite books.
I think it's probably my favourite book of all time. Some of it I didn't understand, the more technical aspects, but this, in fact, it changed my creative world, because I fully understood the connection between mathematics and music and creativity. So connected with that, I would say, what do you feel about the role of creativity in discovery and science?
Oh, it's central. I think that, as you say, that Gödel, Escher and Bach, and the central thesis, as far as I read it, is that there is something that we want to know about. Call it nature. And I imagine it as sort of some structure. Imagine something on your table, some structure, some sculpture or something. And there are different lights. We can see the shadows, always see the shadows. So you can shine different lights on that. And one light casts a shadow one way, and the other light casts a shadow the other way. The lights, so we see the lights are art and music and science and philosophy and literature and theology and all those things. And they all cast different shadows. And we're trying to reconstruct this higher dimensional object, right? Whatever it is, the truth about nature that we don't have access to. And so the more lights you can shine on it, the more likely you are to get access to it. So I think that that science is fundamentally no different to music or arts or literature. The key point is you have to recognize there's something worth exploring and something worth understanding about nature. Let's call it nature. And the way that you go about that is secondary.
Fantastically put, I think, and I completely agree. What music are you making at the moment? Do you make any music at the moment?
I do. I tend to play piano now, actually. I mean, I taught myself, and I started with synths, right? I mean, I was a geek, basically, so I just wanted to be in craft work when I was so,
Club, I'm just going to show you this. One sec, hold on. So this is my first ever synth that I played being boiled on, the System 100, the Roland, yeah. And I still use it all the time.
I was like one of those.
Yeah, they're
I couldn't get those. Yeah, the first synth I bought, and I wish I kept it, was a Krumar Spirit.
Oh yeah,
which are worth a fortune. It was, it had the same filters as the Moog, the Mini Moog, I think.
So, what's your favourite synth of all time? Would you say?
Probably that one. I could have sold it, but I don't know why I sold it. But no, I've got the only synth I've got from the old days when I was in bands is a JX10, which is the only thing I've got left from the old days. And I've got a Phantom now, the Roland Phantom, which is a brilliant piece of kit. So I like that.
You need to get sponsored by Roland. Do you sponsored?
I know I'm not sponsored by Roland, but I do know them. So yeah.
You should get some kit for them, man. Definitely.
Yeah, the Phantom is a brilliant.
Phantom's great, yeah.
But yeah, my favourite. I used to play. I mean, the JX10's been with me for a long time. I've played most of the gigs I've played since the late '80s. Have been the JX10's been there, and it's still in the garage, and it almost works. most of the keys work.
Most
But
of
I
them.
used to have an OB8, so I like the OB8, but it was a hell of a, it was
Oh,
the best
yeah.
thing to have on stage because it used to just stop working most of the time.
Well,
So
I used to have a Jupiter 8, and I had to stop taking it to play because it was so heavy.
yeah.
Just traipsing that thing around. It was like a, oh my god. Um, so tell me some rock and roll stories then. Come on, you must have some.
Rock and roll stories that I can broadcast.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
come on. It's good for your credibility.
well, my first band, the Dare, the rock band, and it'd been formed by Darren Watt, been the keyboard player in Thin Lizzy, and so had a we were just from Oldham, apart from him, because he played on Thunder and Lightning and I think Black Rose and those Lizzy albums. But apart from him, we were just all. I'd never been out of the country, and I joined this band when I was 18. And we got a record deal with A&M, and the first thing we did was went to LA to record the album.
Oh my god.
And we did it with who I still know actually, Larry Klein, who was married to Joni Mitchell at the time.
Wow.
He's a great bass player. He played bass on some of those great albums here, and he's still a producer, quite a big producer now. But so we did some of it in Joni Mitchell's house.
No.
Which was just really ridiculous, because we're staying in Hollywood and
You're just kids from like Oldham in Hollywood. Yeah.
So it was, an A&M at the time, late 80s, had money. So it was the tail end of that time, I think, so we were, they were paying our room service bills in the Hollywood Roosevelt, and it's like, what? Why would you do that? So we, as you would from Oldham, had a good time doing that. And then the first tour, so after that, so we've been in LA, recorded this album, and then came back, and the first tour was supporting Jimmy Page. So we supported Jimmy Page, and then Gary Moore, and then with the Thin Lizzy connection, I suppose, and then Europe, the band, which is a different.
Oh my god!
So, but they did an enormous tour of Europe. The 58 gigs, I think, it was 60 gigs around Europe over 3 months in quite big venues, the big Paris, Les Zénith, and those kind of things. So that was my introduction to music. Was
That's crazy.
Joni Mitchell, and then these huge tours. So that was fun. We did it on a tour bus, just bussed around Europe.
God, tour buses are fine when you're young, but I have to say, we did a tour with M17 recently, a couple of years ago, and I'm 64 now, and I'm going, I am never doing this again, ever again. Sleeping in a coffin with everybody laughing and not going to sleep till 4 a.m, and then waking up in a car park in Glasgow. No thanks.
That's what
I require a 4-star minimum.
Exactly. No, I'm with you because I taught now. I do bigger gigs now than I used to. With my live shows. But I won't. In America, my promoter tends to say, "Can we do it on the bus?" No, we cannot.
No, definitely not.
We used to sit at the back of the bus and put "Wish You Were Here" on and just drink till 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And we not for me anymore.
Yeah, but you're immortal at that age, or you think you're immortal anyway. Yeah. That's the thing. So you're a humanist, self-avowed humanist. I am too, really, I suppose.
Yeah, but I don't know. I know it says that on Wikipedia, but I don't like the title actually. I mean, so I don't have any belief in God or anything like that. But I'm certainly not antagonistic. I have some very good friends. I've got a friend who was the dean of Guildford Cathedral for a long time. So I don't like the labeling because I think it's divisive. So I don't know where that came from. I think what happened was that I gave a talk for the Humanist Association. I think they call it the British Humanist Association, and that made me an honorary member.
Oh, I see.
And so that's why it says it. But and I said to them, I don't really want. It's not that I don't support it because I did. I gave a talk, to raise money. It's a good cause. They do good stuff. But also, I just think that as I've got older, I've realised that really the division in society is between people of goodwill and people of
Oh
not.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's I'm not really, so I'm interested in working with and talking to people who just have, are
Yeah,
just good people. And there are certainly good people who believe in God, and there are certainly good people who don't. So
yeah.
I don't actually like the labels.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I only have one rule in my professional life is no arseholes, basically. I can't, it's just not worth my time dealing with their problems because I regard it as a problem for them, not me.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it.
that's the way I conceptualize it. Right, two things. You've done so many popular science programs on the television, and you're really fantastic at it. Hence the national treasure thing, which I made up. You're a national treasure, and uh, and but I do honestly think that we need a new program about. I used to love Tomorrow's World when I was growing up,
Yeah,
and I miss it. I miss it. Well, I go back as far as um, the 60s. It really had an influence on my love of science
mm.
and futurology and everything. I think you'd be the perfect presenter for it.
It's funny because it was always, it was Thursday night, wasn't it? It's Tomorrow's World Top of
Yeah,
the Pop. And I got to be on Top of the Pops as you did. I'm sure,
yeah.
like 5 times I think I did Top of the Pops, and so but I never got on Tomorrow's World. And I agree with you that I think I think that the BBC know this. I think they do too few science programs.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they do. I do these big things that come around once every couple of years because it takes ages to film them. And we used to have Stargazing Live, which I loved, but we don't do that anymore. Um, and so, yeah, I think what I say to the BBC is that, I mean, I love the BBC as I love many institutions in the country. I think the institutions of the country are important. But I make the radical suggestion that they should all work together in the national interest. That's my
I don't think it's
that's my
radical. I think
radical.
it's common sense.
Yeah, and I think it does therefore have a responsibility to have science programming of that type on BBC One in prime time. Because if there's any justification at all these days for that kind of public service broadcasting and not Netflix and Amazon and things, is that hopefully if people are watching EastEnders or something like that, they might just stumble across something that they weren't really interested in. It's part of the education system.
Absolutely.
That's what
Absolutely.
education is. And so I think even though it's true that not so many people watch these linear channels anymore, and it's probably going to fade away in a linear sense, right? People don't. Maybe it's not so true. People do sometimes sit there and watch telly,
I
and
do.
then
I do.
but the thing is, we don't want people to just watch what they choose. It sounds like almost ridiculous, but I'm not, I'm just saying that if all I was interested in is computer games, if I'm a 15-year-old, I'm just interested in computer gaming, nothing else, then the idea that that's all you will ever watch is not, it's not a great idea. You need to be introduced to new ideas, and so I think we have to fight for that somehow to not have audiences ghettoize themselves. It's
Completely.
really hard now because you've got so much competition. So it's easy, isn't it? It's just so easy. So I'm only watching this sort of stuff, and you can do that. But I think the BBC still has a role because people do watch things like EastEnders and Strictly and stuff like that. And the real key to public service broadcasting is to mix other stuff in with that. And Tomorrow's World was that because it came before Top of the Pops. So,
Exactly.
our generation always watched Tomorrow's World and then Top of the Pops. Even if you were just waiting for Top of the Pops to come on,
Well,
you'd watch
also,
Tomorrow's World.
lest we forget, I mean, you're young, a lot younger than me, but when I was growing up in the '60s, science was literally as cool as rock and roll and pop
Yeah.
because of the space race and because it seemed like an endless golden kind of future of exploration and new stuff that was coming along. And Tomorrow's World was part of that in a small way. But there are people on the fucking moon. You know, and we watched it on the
Yeah,
telly. You know, that I mean, we haven't had that joy for decades. You know, so
yeah.
um, and I just don't think there's enough inspirational programming. Not just on the BBC. I mean, generally, it's all very kind of soma. You know, it's all just fulfilling a kind of sensory need, but it's
Yeah.
not really. You know, the original purpose of the BBC, as embodied by Leith and all that stuff, is to lead, not to follow. They shouldn't be slavishly following viewing figures. They're
Mm.
not. They're not in the same field. You know, they don't need to do that if they don't want to. It's part of their charter. So anyway, it's something I feel very passionately about because I really believe that the BBC, at its best, can unite and give identity to the country.
Yeah.
And I think it's not doing that role as well as it used to, and I think it's sad. You know.
I mean, it's hard. It is, you know, in its defense, it is hard because obviously there's a huge amount of competition, and very, you know, that you see viewing figures on the so-called overnight viewing figures now, and they don't bear any relation to what they did 10 years ago. You know, but ultimately, what you see is the viewing figures are good when iPlayer has been so more people are watching the on demand now.
Yes.
That's true. But I think we have to find a way. I agree with you of ensuring there's some glue as a country. There's some kind of you know, broad-based institutions that, and we do have them. And there's, you know, I mean, obviously the NHS is in the focus at the moment. It's tremendous success and the job it's done during the pandemic. So there's a great institution. But also, you know, the BBC and our universities and our great scientific institutions. The Royal Society, which I'm a fellow, you know, is the oldest scientific body in the world. That it's remarkable. Newton was a member of that thing. So you can't build those things. You know, a country can't. It's so difficult to build that kind of heritage and foundation. Just in the same way you couldn't build a thing like the BBC anymore. So they're very hard to create now, but they're really easy to destroy. And we will all, you know, we'll pay a price if we end up with no national broadcaster. Remember, it's charter. The point of it is to operate in the interest of the country,
Exactly.
not shareholders. That you could argue the shareholders are us, but you know there isn't a business case to be made for the thing anymore. So what is it? It's a thing like the NHS or a thing like the Royal Society. That's what it is.
Yeah. The problem with any large-scale institutions like the BBC is that ultimately, and it's the same in the commercial world as well, ultimately they become more about their own process than they are about what they output, you know, so, or the outcomes. So, you know, there's a lot of people, I hate to say it, that are involved in the BBC who are feathering their own nests in terms of the management structure, and we all know it happens once in a while. You have to have a shakeout and get rid of the dead wood and all that.
I must say that most people I meet understand Arethian. I mean, you know, it's but it's under it's under a lot of pressure, isn't it? I mean, it's
under a lot of political pressure.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to be. Yeah, Tim Davie has a hell of a job, as Tony Hall did before. You know, it's running that thing these days is horrendously difficult because you're always pissing someone off, basically. You know, and it goes back to the point that we spoke about earlier, that the fact that I get annoyed by things that happen in society is a cause for celebration because it means I'm in a free society.
Well, that's a moot point. I mean, how free are we? That's the issue. But anyway,
well, we still get annoyed. We at least people are free to do things that annoy us, and we're therefore, and also we're free to do things that annoy other people. And that's actually the fundamental. That's the signal that you have freedom, and that's often missed. Right? There is a sense today. I do get the sense, we ranting on that. I do get the sense in which people don't like to be irritated or annoyed by other people. But I've realized that actually the very fact that I'm getting irritated and annoyed means that they're doing stuff that they want to do doesn't
Yeah.
agree with me, and that's a good signal.
Except for Nigel Farage. Anyway, moving on.
There was some,
You don't have to say
yeah,
that. I said it's all right.
there were some exceptions.
Yeah. Um,
It's
another
hard, man.
another job you could have is replacing Patrick Moore. Really, that's not really been.
You can't replace him though. I mean, the Sky at Night is still going. I mean, a
I
very
know.
good friend of mine, Chris
I mean,
Linden,
it got pushed later and later and later, didn't it? And
that's another of my arguments with the BBC. I think that the Sky at Night is a almost uniquely valuable program.
I agree.
And I think it needs a slot on. If I was in control, I'd have it on BBC One. I'd say, right, this is on. It's before EastEnders. There it is. Once a month. It's only on once a month. Once a lunar month. It's on.
You
Actually.
need to be the Minister for the Arts, mate. That's what you need to be.
So there should be a slot on there. This is what I would have on where, and every night there'd be something else. There's some public service
Yes.
before the big audience puller or afterwards. And even just a few of that, a little bit of audience trickles into that slot. Then you would see a program on the arts, visual arts, and then music. And then sometimes it'd be astronomy, and sometimes it'd be something else. And that's how I would build that channel, BBC One. I'd say it's Breathian.
Yeah.
Educating and entertaining. That's what it is. And they would probably argue it is, but I would pay much more attention to those slots right in the middle, in the peak viewing hours.
I say Professor Brian Cox for president. That's what I say.
Yeah.
That's seriously. I agree with everything you say, and here's a good point, isn't it? A bit more serious before we get onto the daft bit at the end. I mean, science is under threat, isn't it? I mean, the perception, the denial of scientific facts is a massive problem worldwide now, particularly with climate change. What can we do to fight this absolute torrent of misinformation?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's under threat. But I was just talking earlier, actually, to some people about the pandemic, and we've got a Royal Society event this evening, actually, talking about the vaccines, which is online. So,
Right, okay.
It's at 7 o'clock, I think. Was it 6 o'clock? Anyway, I should find out, shouldn't I? Because I'm hosting it. But one of the things come up is that's been. It's so demonstrably true that ultimately science has got us out of this mess. And it's true that when we were in the mess, there's a lot of other stuff that was going on in healthcare and things like that, which is tremendously important. But ultimately, we're out of it. We're on the way out because of the vaccines. Nothing else. That's how we get out of this problem. And that's pure science. And the thing is, it was built on expertise that was in place before there was a pandemic, obviously. So these people in Oxford and around the world who put together these vaccines which work, those people were educated 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's investment decades before that we're now reaping the rewards of. And it tells you, it's an absolutely fundamental lesson, that expertise is necessary in society. And you get it by investment now. It's investment for future generations now. That's how you do it. Because there will be another pandemic and there will be other challenges that come along. And the way to solve them, obviously, is knowledge. That's how we've got out of this mess, ultimately, because somebody knew how to. This remarkable technology, this new RNA technology in the Pfizer vaccine that you said you'd had, it's revolutionary. One of the panels I chaired, there was some speculation at the end that it could be applicable, for example, to cancer, because cancer is a failure of the immune system, ultimately. And because we're learning now at an accelerated rate about the immune system and how to train it and direct it, and these technologies that we developed through the pandemic they've taken us 10 years into the future of where we would have otherwise been. And those technologies are going to be applicable to a wide range, not only of infectious diseases, but all immune disease.
Wow.
And so what you see here is it's obviously true that science is valuable.
Yes.
And very few people, I know there's a kind of anti-vaccine, not so much in this country actually, but in the States, it's a bit more of a problem. But ultimately, what you're seeing is people accepting the fact that experts are good, because the experts develop the vaccines, which are getting us out of a tremendous mess. And so I hope, optimistically, it's a knock-on effect, because it's no different to climate modeling. Climate modeling is the same. It's the same thing. It's us understanding nature, making models of it, trying to understand it and understand how the system works. It's the same basic principle as understanding the immune system and developing vaccines. So I think there's a bit of a chance here that we have to a real silver lining.
Yeah, really. I mean, I've always believed that the stuff about immune systems, it just seems to be all roads lead to that for me. Because a lot of the things that have been determined to be connected to the immune system, and they didn't really understand the disease or how to treat it. They go, well, it's something to do with a virus. You know, how many times did I go to a doctor? I'd have a cough or something, like it's a virus. It'll go away in 8 to 10 weeks. I'm going to cough for 8 to 10 weeks. You know, maybe that's a minor thing, but if you've got Crohn's disease, that's an autoimmune thing. That's a lifetime thing. If they can cure the stuff that keeps that perpetuating that in your body, and also AIDS vaccines and stuff like that, it's incredible the progress that's been made.
Malaria, you know, there's a malaria vaccine there.
Is there?
Which seems to be doing very well. But this vaccine technology, it was likened to 3D printing almost at the point now where you get a new virus like the COVID virus, whatever it's called. It's got some name, the virus, isn't it?
Yeah.
SARS-CoV, whatever. Yeah. And you can sequence it in 24 hours, right? So the gene sequence is through. And we're almost at this point now where you can just then run off a vaccine. And certainly the way that we tweak the vaccines that we've got as new variants come along is almost done on the fly now.
Incredible.
It's so efficient. And that's something that we could have had. We could have been this good 10 years ago, probably, had we invested. Or you know, now we're this good because we really did invest when the time came along and all the money went in. It's an astonishing effort, by the way. I mean, the fact
incredible, yeah.
You know, in really 18 months from a new disease to having not one but 3 or 4 extremely effective vaccines is unbelievable. And the thing is, it's Newton's phrase, it is resting on the shoulders of giants. And so when what I hope happens is when governments look back on this and they say, well, how do we prepare for the next one? Then it's investment in education and research and development. But education, and that goes to the thing that you asked ages ago, how do you change this view of science? Ultimately, it has to be at school level, I think. It has to be, it's about understanding what science is. Once you understand what it is, then it's hard to disagree that it's a good thing. But you have to understand what it is.
I'm worried about having to pay for university fees for young people. I think we're only just starting to see the negative effect of that in the current generation. Yeah. And I think there's going to be a strong possibility it's going to put people off doing undergraduate courses, etc. Because it's just too expensive, and it should be funded by the state, in my view. Anyway,
it's difficult because with a university hat on, it's true that we need these universities that compete with the big universities in the States and so on, and so and then you say, well, someone's got to pay for it. Who pays for it? I agree with you, though. I think that the universities are one of the fundamental building blocks of our society, and they if you assessed properly how much they are worth and how much wealth they generate in society, not only intellectual wealth but actual wealth, just be brutal about it, capitalist about it, they pay for themselves hundreds of times over. There's no doubt. If you remove the university system from this country, the country will collapse.
I think so.
There'll be nothing there. There'll be nothing happening. So So I agree with you that I think it's one of those things that society has to look at. It's tremendously cost positive for society, and therefore society should pay for it. But it's quite expensive. So it is, you're asking people to pay quite a lot of tax if you want to run a world-class university system. And so I suppose the way that it's been agreed at the moment is that that tax burden falls on the people that operate and go through the system. I agree with you though. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's quite complicated because it is a lot of money. It's tens of billions. It's big money. It's not little money.
Yeah. I was invited to, I'm sure you've been as well, to MIT in America, and they had, I was shown around by a friend of mine who's Todd Mackover, who's like, he's head of a creative kind of section of MIT that looks at integrated multidisciplinary stuff that inform each of the different sections informs the other, and it's like, you multiply the effect. And they are incredibly well funded, but they're largely funded from private companies and individuals. And the one place they wouldn't let me have a look in was the nanotech section, because they said that's where the secret stuff, that's like Man from Uncle territory, right? It's behind the scenes. That's where the money's going to be in the future. And so there is a commercial way of paying for this that will actually pay back in the end, but not everything should be commercialized, of course, because some of it is so esoterically connected to commercial benefit. The problem is the cost benefit analysis, a return on investment mindset that tends to be. And so go on, sorry, carry on.
So you see it today, there it looks like arts funding for arts degrees and arts courses are going to be cut, and it's tiny amounts of money. That is small amounts of money. I mean, what is it, 10 or 20 million?
Yeah.
But it makes enormous impacts, and that does reveal, I think, a lack of understanding in government about what the university system actually is, or what education is. Right? Education ultimately is not to produce this sort of cannon fodder for the knowledge economy. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
It ultimately, I mean, but having said that, even if you took that view, the music industry is an enormous generator of wealth in this country. So the idea that you would, think that somehow people studying music is a luxury is beyond me. It's not a luxury. It's a fundamental part of the economy and our culture. It's what is our culture without musicians? And what you're essentially saying, if you're not funding people to go to study music, is you're saying that only people who are pretty well off.
Well, I'm afraid to say, and I'm going to say it, and you don't have to endorse it, but I'm saying it. It's the current Conservative Party don't see as much value in art and music. They just don't get it. It always reminds me of that Monty Python sketch where you got John Cleese as an accountant beyond the counter. And somebody comes in and says, I can't remember what it was. It's like could you make a donation to charity or something? And he went, I don't get it. Can you explain it to me? What? How do we make money out of this?
What do I get back?
Yeah, what do I get back? And I honestly think that's embedded into that level of society in Britain. Unfortunately, not everyone. I'm generalising, obviously, but it seems to be the case anyway.
Well, I don't really think that people. How do you, the live events industry in general, it's an enormous industry. I don't know how you think people get into it. There's no way of being educated. You don't just suddenly sit down at a mixing desk, and go, oh, that's all right, I can do this. I mean, I know many of us, you find out if you're in bands and things like that ultimately. But there's a place for actually being educated in those areas. I don't see why. As you said, I don't see why being educated to play an instrument and make music is any more or less valuable than being educated to do physics.
Exactly.
I just don't see the difference.
And also, there's a place for people who create communal joy. We all need to celebrate our existence. Joie de vivre. What happened to that as a concept? It seems to have gone,
Well, I mean, in the live shows that I'm doing, the start is set to Sibelius. So Sibelius, early 20th century Finnish composer.
Yeah,
And,
love him.
I asked a friend of mine who's a conductor, what should Stanley Kubrick have used in 2001? Kind of half as a joke, what should he have done? Like,
Yeah.
not that Strauss stuff. And he just said, Sibelius, Fifth Symphony, Third Movement. Listen to that. It's this, and it's a celebration of nature like you've never heard. Nominally, it's about swans taken off from a lake. But he wrote this in 1914, I think 1913, 14. So it's First World War, and also Finland was about to engage in a civil war. So it was horrendous, it being in Finland at that time for so many reasons. And yet Sibelius decides that he'll celebrate the beauty of nature. And it's a fundamental, the reason I like it is it's about all of nature. It's about our relationship to nature and the majesty of life and the remarkable fact that we exist at all and how beautiful it is. And you think if you remove that from human thought, right, what have you got left? Like, there's
Even Winston Churchill understood that, right?
Yeah. So it's so valuable that kind of music is available, and even that, to preserve that particular kind of music in a live setting requires society support. Because orchestras, you can't run orchestras. So what are we to do? Are we to think that in the 21st century, as a society, we should get to the point where there are no orchestras, where they don't exist anymore? And where do those musicians come from?
Yeah, what's the return on investment?
Yeah, so I could go on forever about this, but I think it's
very important.
You're almost like picking winners in culture, aren't you? What government has a tendency to do is to say, well, we like, and it depends on the fashion of the government in power, but it's always wrong to say, well, the mathematician is more valuable than the musician, or the physicist is more valuable than the English literature graduate, or so on. It's always wrong, because culture is so interconnected.
Yeah.
I said before that what culture is a response to the human condition. Ultimately, we're exploring the human condition.
Fantastic.
You explore that with a screwdriver. You've got to add that in as well.
Okay. Hold on. Sorry, got a cough. Right. Here's the smash hits bit. Right. So I ask all my podcast guests similar questions. It's not your favorite color, don't worry. But I asked for favorite things. So what's your favorite film, or one of them?
Oh, it's like your favorite song, isn't it? There's something that I watched when I was younger, probably. So the film that had a huge impact on me was Alien. Alien had a massive. I saw it when I was 11. And
that would have an impact on you.
That's amazing. So I always think that, and also 2001 I saw when I was quite young, and it had a big influence. So I know it's pretty predictable.
No, it's.
I watched a Truman Show last night again. That's a great film, so I watched that. It's sometimes the last film that I watched.
Which is your favorite, or one of your favorite books?
Well, you mentioned one of them, Go to Electronically Park. Another one, there's a great book. I'm deviating from science and predictability. Right. There's a great novel I read when I was in Hamburg. Actually, it made a big impact on me, called The Famished Road by Ben Ockery.
Oh, right.
I think it won a Booker Prize. But it's a well thought of book. But that's the one. If I'm thinking of not science fiction books or textbooks, that just springs to mind as being one of those books that I remember very vividly. Good. As a remarkable book, and it's almost a magical look at nature from a particular perspective. It's a beautiful book.
Who's your favorite on that subject? What's your favorite science fiction author?
I grew up with Arthur C. Clarke and Asimov, which is really predictable, I think. But I went back to Arthur C. Clarke because I'd read Childhood's End and all these books when I was young and loved them. And I went back to The City and the Stars recently, which I hadn't read for decades and decades, and it was still brilliant. I thought it was a fantastic book. And also the Foundation, I read that probably when I was 15 or something.
Oh,
I
yeah.
went back to look at the Foundation. It's been made into a TV series now, so I hope it.
Has it? I bet they don't do it justice. It's hard
Well, I
to
haven't seen
do.
it. It's not been on it. It's one of those multi-$100 million
All
animations.
right.
So
All
it
right.
might be quite good.
So, epiphanal moment in your life that changed the direction of your life.
Do you know what? I know the answer to this because when I said, I was into craft work and things like that. And so when I was into craft work and OMD and Ultravox and those bands, because that's 79, 80, 81, when I was getting into electronic music, Human League, of course. And then I took my sister, my younger sister, she's 18 months younger than me. And my mum and dad said, take her to a gig. She wants to go to a gig. And I didn't want to go. And I said, I'll take her. And it was a Duran Duran gig on the Seven of the Ragged Tiger tour. And I went to that gig not really liking or caring about Duran, and came out thinking, I just want to be a pop star.
Oh,
because it was the first time that I'd seen that kind of band at the peak of their powers. It was Leeds Queen's Hall. It's not there anymore. But this packed, screaming mass of girls, basically. And I thought, I want to do that. So that's when I really decided I'd love to be in a band. I just want to be in Duran Duran, basically.
You wanted all the girls. I know, that's what you wanted.
But it was just that whole thing. So it was that moment when I thought, I really want to learn to play something. So I had like mono synths and we pissed around with tape recorders and things. So I taught myself to play as a result of that, and then ended up joining the band when I was 18 with in Dare, which talked about earlier. So that was a direct result, pretty much. And Nick Rhodes has become a really good friend of mine now. So
has he?
So it's kind of it's kind of come full circle.
Amazing!
I know the band really well, and still think that that they're just a great band.
They are.
And live, they're brilliant.
Yeah.
But that was quite life changing.
I've got an interesting story. I interviewed Nile Rodgers a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And his epiphanal moment was going to see Roxy Music, believe it or not.
Was it?
Yeah, in New York. He knew nothing about them, and he said it was the first time. It's before he formed Chic. It was the first time he'd been in an audience that was like in his words, like a completely immersive environment, because all the audience were dressed like the band on stage. It was that glam thing, right? Yeah. And he said, I want to do a band like that. I'm going to do a band that dresses really smart. And that's where he got the idea from for Chic, and the title and the name.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? Okay, favourite visual or conceptual artist?
I think I went to a great exhibition which had a big impact on me a while ago by Peter Greenaway.
Oh yeah, my favourite.
I think it was called Icarus, the exhibition. It was in Stockholm, I saw it actually, and that was quite remarkable. I mean, it was sort of weird. It's kind of a weird celebration of flight, but also flying too close to the sun, and it had like a decaying seagull in it, but it also had actors throwing poses and things. It was just, it made a big impression on me actually. So that was.
Yeah, Peter Greenaway's done some incredible stuff. I used to live in Venice for a while, well, decades actually, and he used to do a lot of world premieres of his and site-specific stuff in the churches in Venice. Some of the stuff he did there was amazing. Anyway, your ambition unfulfilled.
I would quite like to make a science fiction movie.
Yeah. Or write the music for it, direct it, acting.
Yeah, write it. Involved in the writing of it. No, I'm not going to act. I've got some. I think there's no one, Interstellar notwithstanding, no one's got close to 2001.
I would agree with that.
I'd quite like to have a go at that.
And what would the central kind of premise of it be? Have you had a thought about that?
It'd certainly involve it had certainly involved black holes, which is problematic because Interstellar sort of has got copyright on them at the moment. Although what's interesting is that they made that and Kip Thorne, as I said, one of the world experts, but it's before all this information paradox stuff was solved. So that's not in it, because we've made a load of progress since Interstellar was made.
Right.
The element of black holes. But ultimately, the live show that I've got coming this year and next year is cinematic, and it's the basic idea is one question, which I think is the only interesting question, which is what does it mean to live a small finite life in an infinite eternal universe? That's what I think the most interesting question. There's no other question worth.
You're making my head hurt.
What does it mean? What does it mean that we lit these brief, Macbeth, right? Brief candles, right?
Yeah.
Is it really that it's a tale told by an idiot?
Yeah.
Sound and fury and signifying nothing. Is that what life is?
Probably.
Or is it? Is there more to it than that? Is it how are we to accept our fragility and value ourselves? So I think that's what my live show is about. But that's in some sense what 2001 is about as well. So that would be central.
You're a very wise person, and yeah, I think a lot of people who are going to be listening to this podcast are going to take a lot out of this. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. The final question, at last. I've already asked you the synth question. What's your favourite synth? So we've already done that. Okay.
No, I said no. It's a good question. What would I like? I'd like Jupiter 8. Oh no, I'd like a Prophet 5. I always wanted a Prophet 5, and I've never had one. So, but now, of course, they're prohibitively expensive. I know they make a kind of new version of Prophet 5, don't they? Which sounds good apparently.
They never
quite an old one.
Yeah, you want an old one with the original, kind of circuit boards and everything, rather than chips. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, to get a Jupiter 8 now in good nick, it's about 10 grand. It's probably.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Okay, finally then. So who's your favourite composer?
At the moment, I would say it's either Sibelius or Mahler, both of whom feature in my live show, and not personally, but because I've done some work with orchestras. I did a thing with the Melbourne Philharmonic. Symphony, MSO, Melbourne Symphony, in just before the pandemic, actually, where this initial idea I'd had of using Sibelius and Mahler to illustrate or amplify the questions that are raised by cosmology. I tried that out, and it worked really nicely, actually.
Wow!
Because Mahler's 10th, right? I mean, Mahler's 10th.
It's an incredible piece.
Mahler's 90th is the last thing he finished, but the 10th, he finished the first movement.
Yeah.
And it seems to me to be a response to this question that I asked, which is raised by cosmology, which is we're tiny and finite. And even the Milky Way galaxy has 400 billion stars in it, of which we go around one. And there are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, of which the Milky Way is one. And there's more universe beyond the horizon than we can see. And it might be infinite. And so, but Mahler, I think, having been someone who was profoundly concerned about death, right? And it came to him, his daughter had died unexpectedly and things like that. He writes this piece of music, the first movement of the 10th, which is the last thing he wrote, which is just redemptive. It's a remarkable expression. It's an answer. It's the best answer I have seen to the question that I posed, which is a question I think raised by cosmology and physics about the meaning of it all, really. Wow. And so I think that, so I did that with the Melbourne Symphony, and it was wonderful. And so I've got a plan to do it again in a bigger way with one of the big orchestras in London. Maybe
wow.
Or something like that.
I've got to come to do this. What's it called, the show?
The show I'm doing this year is called Horizons.
Right.
And that's, so you must come. And that's,
I will come. And you should come to I'll force you to come to one of our shows.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd love to, because I said I'm a big fan. too many decades. No. But,
We're actually doing a show in London at the Roundhouse, which was meant to go on just when lockdown started first time around, and it got postponed. As Heaven 17, we're restaging the first two Human League albums with Glenn singing, obviously, because Phil won't do it. Reproduction and Travelogue with massive visual accompaniment and like recreating the original slideshow idea and all that stuff. And that's dead. It's just going to be two shows, one in Sheffield, one in London. So you should come to that.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
I'd love to see that. And yeah, and I've got mine. We've got the O2 on the October the 2nd, I think is our first, hopefully. If we're allowed to. And we've got Wembley later in the month at the end as well.
I'm going to be tapping you. I'm going to be tapping you up for tickets, definitely.
No, yeah, you definitely come. Definitely. It's one of the great things about the O2. There's always room.
Oh, there's always room. Yeah. Is it going to turn into something? I think about there was that David Essex film Stardust, and it stuck with me when I was a kid because like he turns into this kind of messianic kind of rock star thing, if I remember rightly. I was just imagining you on a cherry picker hovering above the audience. Like, I have discovered the secret of the universe. You know?
An element of, stadium cosmology. I have my friend Robin Ince with me. He's great at do the Infinite Monkey Cage with. He's very funny. So he's the kind of antidote. So he comes on every now and again to take the piss. And just like, let me hear you say quantum chromodynamics. So we do take ourselves not as seriously as
good. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I think it's just, this is one of the best things about doing these podcasts is to reconnect with old friends, but to make new friends, and fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing it. I really appreciate it. And I will see you in the autumn, and I will let you know when our show is, and I'll come and see you.
Absolutely, and we should go out for a drink.
Oh, let's go out for a drink. Oh my God, you mean you can actually meet people in the flesh?
What is it now? It's been 2 weeks' time. We're doing this on May 6th, aren't we?
Yeah. So by then, it's going to be like it's going to be like the last days of Rome by the time this comes out.
It is.
everybody, like a giant orgy on Primrose Hill, Anyway, all right. I'll see you later, man. Thank you so much. Bye.